If you're struggling to quit porn and masturbation, you are not alone. Millions of men around the world are stuck in the same cycle. Hi, my name is Mark Kweppett, and I've personally struggled with a porn addiction all through my teens and early 20s. Thankfully, though, I was able to quit and stay clean since 2013. And since then, I've been blessed to help thousands of other men do the same thing. Now, my initial breakthrough when I first quit porn was a combination of primarily three things. First, it was the understanding of the science of porn addiction. Second is I had an effective quitting strategy. And third, spiritual growth. You see, at that time, I had a reversion to Catholicism, and I reignited my belief in God, and I started practicing spiritually with, pretty significant effort. And it is this spiritual topic that I want to be focusing on here today. And the reason for this is really simple. It's because it's the most important and powerful part, okay? You can know nothing about the science of porn or what it does to your brain. You could have zero strategy for actually quitting porn, but through a growth in grace and love of God, a porn addiction can be totally defeated. By properly understanding porn addiction in a spiritual light and nesting all of your progress under a God-centered approach, you will be building on the strongest foundation possible. Now, to be clear, the spiritual only approach for most guys does not work, okay? For a lot of guys, just simply praying harder or reading more scripture rarely leads to lasting results. And I know this because I've worked with so many guys, many who have very strong convictions, very strong faith lives, but their porn addiction stayed stuck for years, if not decades. When I first got into the work of helping guys quit porn, I focused on the other stuff, the practicals, the tactics of quitting, and trying to make it really specific on what do you actually do. And this will get you progress. But what I found is that over time, I saw that the guys that stayed clean, those are the ones who made a spiritual shift. And the guys who just focused on the tactics, they would make some progress in the beginning, but then, sometimes a month later, a few months later, sometimes even a few years later, they would fall and they'd be coming back to me and be saying, Mark, what's going on here? Why isn't this working anymore for me? And almost always it's because there is something missing in their spiritual life. So the point of this video is to solve that problem before it even starts. It's to help you understand the journey of quitting porn and masturbation from a spiritual lens first. Okay, and for full transparency, I'm a practicing Catholic, and my perspective is primarily focused on helping fellow Christians. But I believe that anyone following an Abrahamic religion, or even someone who chooses to believe in a good and loving God, will be able to align with and get value from what I say here. Now, one more note before we dive into this. If you want a summary of the content here, if you want exercises to help you progress, and you want a host of other resources, then you want to watch this video over on markkweppett.com by clicking the link in the description. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, all right? And we're going to start off by better understanding the problem that we are dealing with. So porn and masturbation, these are fundamentally, sexual issues. And the purpose of our sexuality in the spiritual context is to honor God by being fruitful, right? Be fruitful and multiply. He says it to us right in the beginning. And this means the flourishing of families, the propagation of our species. That's what our sexuality is oriented toward. But this fruitfulness extends beyond just reproduction. Our sexuality is central to our identities and our biology. And a man is only truly alive and honoring God when he is holistically expressing the fullness of his natural masculine characteristics in a positive way. So as a man, you know it. Your sexual energy is potent. It's powerful, right? It's one of the most important energies inside of you. And when it is not used properly, only bad things happen. Now, the biggest thing that gets in the way of proper sexual expression is lust, okay? With porn and masturbation being problems driven primarily by lust. So what is lust? Well, it's basically sexual activity that is misaligned with love and human flourishing. Our society as a whole has completely lost the plot with sexuality, and there are a number of incredibly common ways in which lust perverts the aim of sexual activity. So how does this lust show up? Well, one way is seeing sex as a status symbol. Men identify with their notch count, like the number of women that they sleep with, or, how many women, want to have sex with them and sleep with them, okay? A lot of guys have internalized this. That has nothing to do with honoring God. Another thing is seeing sex as power. All right. It's a way to exert dominance or control over others. For men, in the worst case, this would be, something like rape. But for women, for example, and one of the ways they do this is they try to influence men with their sexuality, right? They try and get money, resources, use men with their sexual appeal. Men can do this too, but that's more of a female thing. But basically using sex as a power tool, a manipulation tool, that's lust-driven and it's not of God. Another big lust-driven activity is using sex as entertainment. Modern society, they treat sex like this little special sauce you can sprinkle on anything and make it more appealing, more entertaining. Shows will add sex scenes. Ads will add that, hot girl on it. It's like one of these things where we just treat it as something it's fun to do. I remember I knew one guy in college. He just used to watch porn recreationally because he thought it was fun. Does this help society flourish? I don't think so. And then we have perhaps the biggest misuse of sexuality is using it as an escape, using it as a mood modifier. Basically, a lot of guys, they've used sexuality as an instant feel-good button. Anytime they feel stressed, lonely, bored, whatever, any kind of negative emotion, they can grab their junk and turn that discomfort into a peak experience of pleasure, especially when utilized in conjunction with high-speed internet porn. In a lot of ways, this dynamic has turned men into big babies, where instead of reaching for, the binky or the blanket or, grabbing for mommy's boob, they reach for the toxic teat of internet pornography. It's just a dysfunctional self-soothing mechanism. And ultimately, all of these dysfunctional forms of sexual expression, they have the dynamic of trying to get something. It's no longer about being fruitful, about producing, it's about consumption. And since this sort of activity is not aligned with God, it naturally causes major problems, both in our personal lives and in the world at large. Now, on the personal level, many of you are probably already familiar with this. That's why you're even watching a video like this. Basically, repeated porn and masturbation causes you to act on selfish compulsion rather than on genuine goodwill, love, or spiritual alignment. It turns you into a slave of immediate pleasure. Further, repeatedly engaging in these activities can cause brain changes that we're going to cover in future videos. But to summarize, these brain changes can lead to a host of damaging effects. It can disrupt you socially, romantically, sexually, even in your ability to focus and be productive. I think if you ask most intelligent guys, particularly ones of faith, and you ask them, hey, who's going to live the better life in general? The guy who uses porn regularly or the guy who doesn't? Who's going to be stronger? Who's going to be more connected? Who's going to be more productive? Who's going to be more focused? Who's going to have more peace in their heart? And it's a guy who doesn't use porn. So individually, it's a massively stunting activity. But to make matters worse, when you have a bunch of individuals who struggle with lust, it leads to society-wide implications. So obviously, a society that has a huge porn problem, they're probably going to have sexual assault issues. If you look at every guy who commits sexual assault, what do you think the percentage of them are porn users? Probably all of them. Not saying that porn will turn every guy into a sexual abuser. That's definitely not the case. But does it increase the likelihood of it on a societal level? For sure. Okay. Secondly, it's going to increase abortions. Why? Because it commoditizes sex. It turns it into a recreational activity. If more people are having sex out of wedlock, disconnected from, making it a spiritual act, there's going to be more instances where there are unwanted pregnancies, which leads to abortion, which is horrible. And then obviously, if we were going to get into one of the biggest hot button issues of the day is, the whole conversation around sexuality in general, right? So many people are confused about their gender. They're confused about their attractions. And the thing is, porn can morph and screw up all of that. Do you think we would be having all of this confusion in society about the role of sex, what a man is, what a woman is, what they're called to be, if porn didn't exist, if people weren't constantly blasting their brain with some of the incredibly bizarre and disruptive imagery over and over and over again? Do you think we'd be having such a big issue? No, of course not. But if we're going to take all of these things and we're going to zoom it out and we're going to ask, what's the biggest negative impact to our world caused by porn? It's in the way that it affects the family, okay? Because a society is built upon communities, and those communities are built upon families. And in those families, they're built upon the sexual relationship between a husband and a wife. And if that core of sexual connection between the husband and wife gets disrupted, well, then there is a negative ripple effect throughout all of society, right? That's where, we got skyrocketing divorce stats. We've got broken homes. And these broken homes, they produce broken people, and broken people produce broken societies. While I think all of this is obviously true to anyone with, a couple of brain cells to rub together, the problem is that our society actually promotes lustful behavior, it promotes porn, it promotes masturbation as normal, if not even healthy. Now, if you were to get even somewhat educated on what porn does to your brain, you might be able to see it as, more of a drug, okay? It's like, yeah, there's downsides or, damaging effects if used in excess. But I think this purely scientific view does not offer a strong enough perspective to really eliminate the habit for most guys. Instead, you have to go beyond just the scientific or the secular understanding of porn. You have to see it for the demonic force that it is. Okay? Modern men of faith have lost their spiritual perspective, and I believe that it has only made us far, far weaker. So, little thought experiment here, okay? I want you to imagine describing porn to someone from the pre-electricity era, okay? All right, like describe to them what the usage of porn entails. It's like, okay, well, you got this little black square thing, okay, your cell phone. And what you do is you can kind of press it, and then all of a sudden you can get images of any kind of sex you want to see. And then you can simulate having sex with what you see on that screen, and it lets you feel good anytime you want. And the fact that it's always new and it's always novel means that it's always going to be exciting, and it's always going to feel really good in the moment. And then if they were to ask, well, what's the effect? And then imagine that you explain to them everything I just said to you, the way it affects the individual, the way it affects society, and how it basically makes everything worse. What do you think that person would say about porn? What do you think their opinion of it would be? Well, if they were a person of any sort of faith, they would probably call porn a demonic sex ritual. And in terms of the actual morality, think about it. Are they wrong, right? How much different is it using porn from drawing a pentagram, offering a sacrifice, and summoning up a succubi to have sex with? Okay? Yeah, obviously there's differences there. There's a distinction in the trappings, but what about on the raw spiritual operation, right? Is it anything different than that? No, it's basically the same thing. You're trading the integrity of your spirit and your fruitfulness for easy and immediate pleasure. Now, to be clear, okay, I'm not saying all this stuff to make you feel shame or judgment, okay? I say this as someone who has been fully sucked into this trap, okay? And I've worked with countless guys who have struggled with this, and I care about you, and I care about the world, and I want to help you with it, all right? Most guys, the reality is they fall into this behavior so early in adolescence, well before they have any idea of what they are doing, right? They didn't, when I first got into porn, I didn't choose to become an addict to something so screwed up. I didn't even know what the heck was happening, right? I barely even understood my sexuality at that point. And then by the time I had any sort of awareness that, hey, this might not be great, I was already entirely addicted. And at that time, I didn't even understand it was addictive. I just thought it was, well, shoot, I have to do this stuff. I just got all this sexual energy inside me. What else am I supposed to do with it? My hope is that through the series of videos I have planned on this topic, I'm going to give you a really clear and useful answer to that question. But we got to start with getting the perspective right. By understanding that in using porn and masturbating, you're cooperating with dark forces that ultimately want to ruin your life and the world at large, it actually makes it far easier than harder to resist, okay? By understanding that this stuff is actually bad, it's bad for you and it's bad for the world, and you can take that seriously on an existential, a philosophical, a spiritual level, it puts your brain in the proper place of spiritual warfare, because that is what we're dealing with here. And the first step of winning this war is to understand what we are aiming for. And really what we're aiming for is the opposite of lust, okay? And that is chastity. Now, if that word chastity, triggers you a little bit, believe me, I understand, okay? When I was young and I was growing up in Catholic school, the concept of chastity to me, it always made me cringe. And it was I viewed chastity as something for dorks who couldn't get girls. I remember the chastity speakers who'd come into our school and tell us to wait for marriage and, don't touch our wiener and that kind of stuff. They just seemed generally uncool, and I couldn't connect with them at all. Basically, I came to associate being chaste with being lame. And I've come to understand how wrong this is. Instead of chastity being something like this, it's really much more something like this. Instead of thinking about chastity as the denial of sexual pleasure, think of it as command over your sexual power. The chaste man, he can hold the power of his masculine charge. He's strengthened by it, he's enlivened by it, and therefore he can direct it fruitfully. The chaste man on the path of holiness, he becomes like a blazing sun within the solar system of his influence, generating more life, more prosperity, more goodness wherever he shines his light. Chastity is a prerequisite for building a brilliant aura of radiant goodwill, both for yourself, for your spouse, for your family, and the world at large, which obviously includes any attractive women you come across. You're not trying to get something from them. You can hold a goodwill toward them and not need something from them. But lust is the opposite of this. Instead of a radiant force, it's like a gaping black hole of neediness, longing, and pain, causing a man to grasp at and consume pleasure, to just take that ache away. You can think of lust kind of like a sinkhole, okay? It's like a void that pulls other energy into it, weakening the overall structural integrity of your spirit, which limits or outright destroys your capacity to build a fulfilling life of grace and love. And sadly, most men only know sexual energy to exist in this grasping form, leaving many to think that this is the natural state of their sexual charge. And because of this, no wonder so many guys feel that their sexual charge is a burden. It's like a poison. It's something they need to get out of their system because the charge is just so unpleasant to sit with. But if I'm going to be honest, I think that mentality, one I used to hold myself, is ultimately weak, effeminate, and guarantees that you will not be able to direct your personal energies towards your highest conception of goodness. Now, if you want to eliminate the destructive patterns of lust and live a life fortified by chastity, we need to address the problem at the root. Just like with a sinkhole, there are forces beneath the surface that erode your integrity and ultimately create these voids that drive lust. Okay? And the three main forces responsible for this are deception, discomfort, and pride. So let's walk through these. We'll start with deception. So finish the sentence for me. Satan is the father of lies, right? Okay. And these lies are where these deceptions come in. It's the rationalizations you either consciously or unconsciously utilize to justify using porn. They all basically follow the formula of it's okay to use porn because XYZ. Like, for example, it's okay to use porn because everyone does it, because it's not worth the effort to quit, because, oh, just one peek won't hurt, or, oh, my wife won't sleep with me, so then I can use porn, or, oh, I need porn to sleep, or I need porn to calm down so I can focus and get my work done, right? The list of rationalizations is endless. Now, the next big force that drives lust is discomfort, like the fear of pain and discomfort. You know, that leads guys to basically give in, right? Because not acting on a porn craving, it doesn't exactly feel good, right? It kind of feels like this itch, this uncomfortable sensation inside of you. Now, on a raw physical level, on the grand scheme of things, it's really not that bad, right? If you were going to rank your worst physical pains in life, like, breaking a leg or an extreme migraine or something, that'd be like a 9 or a 10 on the scale, okay? You're going to talk about a porn craving. Where does that register? It's low. I've heard most guys, they report it's about a 3, a 2, 1.5. Okay. It's really not that bad on a purely physical level. But when we combine it with a deception like, oh, this pain will never go away. Oh, it's only going to keep getting worse, which are all untrue things, which we'll cover more in the future. But, it's enough to deter guys. Now, this discomfort also takes another form beyond just the purely physical, and that is the emotional pain. Okay. And this is what most guys ultimately end up struggling with, particularly the guys who use porn primarily as a mood modifier to make all their negative emotions disappear. Because when they stop using porn, what happens? Well, then they're left with the stress, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the overwhelm, the emptiness, or whatever the other negative emotion they're dealing with is. And if they don't have a way to address that, then it feels overwhelming. It feels like there's just too much pain. I need to have my escape. For some guys, these emotional wounds, they go really deep, all the way down into a fundamental sense of inadequacy that was distilled in them since they were young, maybe through bad experiences, trauma, abuse, all of these kinds of things. So, yeah, that's a big issue, right? This pain is one of the things that keeps many guys hooked. When I was a younger coach, I probably would have said that this pain piece is the biggest reason why guys stay stuck using porn. But I don't think that anymore. I actually now think it's this third influence of lust, pride, that's the real root of things, okay? So what do I mean by pride? Well, pride takes many different forms, but basically it's about a perception of yourself. And particularly for guys who are fundamentally moral, who want to be good men, this pride shows up typically as self-reliance. It's this idea that this problem is on me to fix. And when you step into that mentality, what happens is you start to go to war with yourself. You start to see yourself as an enemy. And so you just keep smashing against yourself. You keep trying to white knuckle things. And every single time that you fail, you get more mad at yourself, you get more down on yourself, which just makes you, honestly, it just creates more emotional pain that drives the escapism even harder. And that's a huge problem. It's one that we're going to have to address very, very specifically, because we're not going to quit porn by defeating yourself. You're going to quit porn by getting those wayward and conflicted parts of you on board so that you actually want to stay clean from the inside out. But there's a deeper layer to this pride piece, this self-reliance piece, and that is that it cuts off your connection to God. It leaves you feeling all alone. And ultimately, this blocks you from embracing a path of grace where you can rely and trust in God's support for you in this process. Like, I'm going to be building this course from the perspective that, you can control all of this, but the reality is you can't. God needs to fill in the gaps. Grace needs to fill in the gaps. And you need to be able to trust in that. You need to be able to rest in that. You need to be able to create the space for that. You need to be able to learn how to discern what God is calling you to do. This is fundamentally a spiritual battle. Yes, there are many important practical components, but without that higher level of perspective, you're missing a huge part of the game. But to summarize my point here is that when the corrosive elements of deception, discomfort, and pride are at play, even slight triggers can cause you to feel craving, frustration, and then justification for reaching for porn to make yourself feel better in the moment. Now, we are going to walk through how to tackle each one of these issues as we move forward in great detail, but the overarching pathway is incredibly simple. Grow in holiness. Right? Grow in your capacity to move from a warm-hearted and radiant goodwill instead of from a grasping sense of self-centered lack. Right? It's about loving God, yourself, and others more consistently and authentically. That is the path to quitting porn. Basically, wherever there's something that's broken, you got to give love to it. You got to fill in the gaps. You got to allow that love, which is God, which is the Spirit of God, to come in and transform what's happening inside of you. So naturally, this means replacing deception with truth. Okay, we got to turn discomfort into worthy sacrifice. And then we need to shift from the pride of relying on your own lacking power into a confident spiritual humility that grants you access to God's unlimited power through grace. So what I'm really getting at here is that any meaningful increase in chastity, it must correspond with an increase in holiness. Otherwise, you're plugging the leak with chewing gum, and whatever progress you make is not going to last. And I put so much emphasis on this right now because I've been the victim of prioritizing the hacks, the tips, the systems, the whatever, okay? And it's great, but when you start getting too invested in all that, you forget that, the whole point of this is to grow closer to God, is to shed that which is not me so that God's design for me can shine through more brilliantly. The best part is that when you approach things in this spiritual way, quitting porn is no longer a shameful and torturous slog you're morally obligated to struggle futilely through into a rite of passage for the modern man that you want to do. Okay? The reality is that any man who makes it on the other side of this problem will be transformed. He will be stronger. He will be wiser. He will be more capable and far more holy than the vast amount of men who exists today. Okay, I firmly believe that if you have found this content, then God wishes you to operate spiritually as one of the masculine elite in this world. Okay, God is not punishing you or abandoning you by allowing you to struggle with porn. He has decided that you are strong enough to stand tall in this screwed up world and become one of his champions against darkness. Okay, and your role is to say yes to that call and trust him to guide you. And of course, I'll be doing everything in my power to assist you in this process as we move forward. And you'll need to take care of what's in front of you. But at the end of the day, the thing that matters most is for you to accept and believe in God's loving grace during this process. So if you got that, then you got the core message of this video. But if you want more resources, you want a summary of this, if you want some exercises that will allow you to continue in this process, then make sure you click the link below and check out markquepit.com, where I'm building out a knowledge base to help men live their best life and unleash their apex potential. So that's what I have for you today. I hope you found this valuable, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Ooyah.